brought to you almost live from the Dude in the Basement Studios. Why? Because that's where the good stuff is. It's Sips, Suds, and Smokes with your smoking host, the good old boys. Suds. It's time for more Suds.
It is definitely time for more Suds today. Welcome to the Suds episode where everything good in life is worth discussing. I am one of your hosts here at the table today. This is Monk Mike. Good old boy Mike. Joining me here at the table are good old boy Dave.
Greetings, children.
Children on a beer show, really?
Gotta start them early.
Wow, just right off the bat, seriously.
I thought this was a kids' beer show.
Barely into it. Do we need to start over again? Everybody want to vote?
It wouldn't be any better.
Good old gal Julieanna, thank you for joining us.
Monkette Julieanna says, hey.
There you go. How about that?
Monkette.
And, of course, we couldn't have a show about this beer without having Reverend Mark here.
Blessings on you, my son.
Absolutely.
And girls.
And daughters.
And kids, apparently.
Yes, of course.
Thought we were getting away from the children. It's okay when Mark says it.
Sips, Suds, and Smokes is sponsored by Craft Beer Kings. Craft Beer Kings, the home of all of your beer and wine needs. They are also home of the Mystery Box.
What's in it?
www.craftbeerkings.com. Our Sud segments are all about beer, and making fun of people from the great state of Alabama. Dave.
Dude, I'm totally not from Alabama.
I'm sorry. It was supposed to be Kentucky today. I should have shifted that
What's
around.
the difference? Kentucky, Alabama.
I agree. Somehow we're going to get banned from either one.
And the blue people.
And the blue people involved.
Watch out for the blue people.
Today's episode is all about discussing strange people in California and a fabulous brewery in that great state.
That's a redundancy.
Yeah.
It's Port Brewing, maker of Lost Abbey, is all about this particular brewery takeover episode. But up first, we're going to get to talk about what we're going to do. Reverend Mark is going to get the honors of going over our Suds ratings for today.
Okie dokie. Suds rating number 1. That sucks. Give me anything but a bud. Suds rating number 2. Was that a belch? Suds rating number 3. Ah, what a relief. Suds rating number 4. A body should really not make that sound. And Suds rating number 5. Listen to that hang time. Give me another.
Cool. So, listen, we're going to be talking about beers today and rating them with those Suds ratings as we go along here. So, today's episode is all about a brewery takeover episode. We'll actually be talking about beer from one brewery today, and that is Port Brewing, maker of Lost Abbey, is what we're going to be talking about today. So, really fabulous. We really love our brewery takeover shows, don't we? I mean, they're really a lot of fun.
They are.
And this one is definitely no exception. So, some of these are fresh beers. Some of these have been cellared for a little bit. Either way, I'm really anticipating some amazing beer from our discussion for today. We've had an opportunity to taste a lot of these beers prior to recording here this episode. So we've captured our tasting notes and watching, Julieanna swoon over yet another, taste of the beer as well. Let me tell you what's in our lineup. Again, all of these beers are from Port Brewing, maker of Lost Abbey. And here are all the beers we're going to go through. There's 8 of them, so hang on to your hats here. Agave Maria, Track Number 8, Deliverance, Lost and Found, Witch's Wit, Angel Share, Judgment Day, and 10 Commandments are all of the beers that we're going to go over again from Port Brewing Lost Abbey. So we got a lot of things lined up for this episode today, and a lot of great stuff to talk about. We're going to spend a minute and cover some background material on Lost Abbey itself, and Miss Julieanna is going to go over part of this, and Dave is going to finish up with the background here on Lost Abbey. Julieanna, take it away.
Okay, first, a moment to gather all of our thoughts, because this has been an amazing...
I'm thinking raisins. Raisins.
This has just been amazing. Okay. All right, I'm done. So, a few years and many beers ago, Vince Marsaglia, oh, the heavens open up, was inspired by the numerous Abbey-style beers that he had tasted and dreamed up a brewery project that produced a range of beers produced with a nod to the monastic brewing traditions of Belgium. Can't blame him there. As Vince imagined it, this brewery had no actual Abbey property involved, making it lost, if you will, from the very beginning. So, for years, the idea of this mysterious lost Abbey-style brewery remained a concept only because, as intriguing as it was, the vision lacked one thing that could make it real: someone who could make this style of beer. Ta-da! So then, that all changed in 1997 when Tom Arthur was hired to brew at Pizza Port, which Vince owns, in Solana Beach, California. In November of that year, he released Dubel Overhead Abbey Ale, the first Belgian-style beer ever brewed. Things really changed in 2006 as Port Brewing moved into their former brewery used by Stone Brewing in San Marcos. Exactly. Today, Port Brewing continues as the vanguard of craft brewing, ranked as one of the top 10 new breweries in the nation, both by industry experts and enthusiasts alike, driven in large part by its extraordinary Lost Abbey beers and a library of 1,000-plus oak bourbon, brandy, sherry, and wine barrels that comprise one of the most remarkable barrel-aging programs for a craft brewery of any size. Distribution has also expanded to major cities and metropolitan areas throughout the country, allowing beer lovers to now enjoy fresh brewed port products from coast to coast.
So, Dave, I asked you to share a little bit about their distribution for Lost Abbey here.
Yeah, so their distribution is really pretty broad. Now, out west, it's mostly contained to California, Arizona, and Colorado, but in the east, major cities like New York, Philly, Chicago, and even Atlanta, you can get their beers, and also over in Eastern Europe some. But we've also seen hot spots in places like North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, where you can also find limited selections as well. Most of the beers come in, are corked with cages, and they come in either 750s or 350s.
Cool. So, it's really great, this story, behind Lost Abbey itself. And, I think one of the questions that, I'd really love to ask Vince, at some point in time is, did you just create the beer because you didn't like what you were serving in the pizza joint? And I really wonder if that was an impetus for, out of necessity, because I'm just kind of looking at the time frame when a lot of this went down, that there just wasn't a lot of great choices for the average small business, pizza joint to really have, a lot of great beer around. And I'm sure that, either being exposed to home brewers that were in the community or, just looking at the economics, of what he was facing itself might have driven some, we'll call it an entrepreneurial moment out of necessity, is maybe how this came down.
Well, I'm just wondering, what type of pizzas, they thought really paired well with Abbey,
these beers.
Abbey-style ales, like a mussels and poutine, or...
I don't know. They get a lot of cheese? I don't know.
Is it a deep dish thin crust?
Dave has way too much time on his hands. So, well, we had a really great conversation, before we hop hopped on the mics here, and we're kind of talking about just the extensive nature of everything that we got to taste, and it was just a lot of really interesting comments. So it wasn't so much of what this beer was as what it was not. I thought was a lot of the nature of the conversation we had, because we all found it really difficult to pick three that we liked. Yeah.
That we like the most.
That we like the most, yeah. But there was a little bit of some common theme. So, Julianna, I'll start with you. I love the one comment you said, these are all really great base beers.
They really are. I mean, and it's just a subtle nuance in each of these that makes them very unique. However, that little subtle nuance really changes the landscape of every beer. And then you're trying to figure out, okay, so which one do I really like better? Because they're all really good in their own way, but it's just this little subtle taste profile which just completely blows everyone out of the water in their own way. So this was very tough, but viewers, we just foraged through it to get our top three.
Because we love you. We care that much about the audience.
Well, so one of the stars of tasting profiles that I think I know I'm going to struggle with is saying the word dark fruit.
Oh, my God.
If there is one common taste profile across nearly every one of these beers, it's some essence of a dark fruit that is laden in all of these. And I think that was what I thought was very different, is that the base beers are very broad. I mean, there are old ales here, there's doubles, there's quads. I mean, there's a really broad range of beers here. So is that do you think that is a result of something that they're doing directly, in a common brewing technique, or maybe a byproduct of a common yeast that they're using?
Reverend Mark, what do you think? Because you're the boss here.
Well, I've noticed that I don't know about the boss.
It's a holy moment.
Exactly. It is the holy moment.
I do see that there are some blended ales that we've tried here that start out with a certain base, one of which is my favorite, which we'll get to in just a minute. So I really do think that there is a really profound artistry going on with how they have arrived at a certain kind of palette of beers that are working really, really well, and barrel aging them, and then adding other kinds of adjuncts in the process to boost, maybe a little bit more pepper or spice. So, for me at least, I think that they've started out with just some really good base beers that they're now, trying to improve upon the best they can. But I don't think you can improve on perfection all that much.
Well, so any other comments you had about the flight in general?
Overwhelming dark fruit. I mean, and what you said is true. Like, how much more can you describe a dark fruit? But each one is like kind of taking...
I'm going to say the word plum about 500 times in the next 45 minutes.
It's plummy, it's figgy, it's raisiny, but it's those, like, some are more concentrated in one way than another. And that is some pretty amazing artistry, to be able to pull out one of those dark fruits and make it so pronounced. Because as brewers, we all know what grains make things dark fruity.
Yeah.
But it's a whole different animal to just bring out one of those dark fruits and make it shine like they have. And so, wow.
Cool. Well, any other quick comments on just the flight in general? We'll take a quick break. If not, all right.
Hey.
Cool. We'll take a quick second break. We're going to come right back with Julieanna's top 3 picks. Can she pick 3? We'll find out. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to Sips, Suds, and Smokes. I am good old boy Mike, one of your hosts here at the table. Today's episode is a Brewery Takeover edition, talking about Lost Abbey. And we have 8 beers that we're going to be going through today. Each of the hosts is going to go through their top 3. As we go around, we're going to try to read the description of this in a timely manner. So I got a pretty big stack of 8 beers to go through, so if we don't get around to the description of the beer right away, just hang tough with us. We're looking for it while we do this. So up first is good old gal Julieanna. Are you going to go 3 to 1 or 1 to 3 or 1 to 8? we always love to harass you. You need a little more cowbell?
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Okay, here you go.
Okay. Dear listeners, this was very tough. And when I say this was very tough, I really mean this was very tough. Because
So was it tough?
It was tough. All 8 of our selections today were really wonderful. So the 3 that I'm going to list are all my top number 1s because I had such a hard time. And I am all giving them the same rating.
Wow.
For all 3 of these puppies.
That'll be a first.
I know. Just because I enjoyed them all, and I'll explain why. Okay. So number 1 in my list of 3 is the Agave Maria.
Huh. Interesting.
Yes, it is an agave-based strong ale. Now, what's interesting about this one, for many reasons, is, first of all, this is an American agave strong ale. So they added agave in with their strong ale base because they wanted to do something different to enhance the tequila barrel. And also, this is using a tequila barrel, and this is the first time they've ever done that.
So here's some of the rest of the description. So this is a strong ale that has been, again, aged in oak tequila barrels. The ABV on this is 13.5%. Here's a quick description from Lost Abbey. Using a blend of Añejo and Raspado barrels, aged for a minimum of 10 months, Agave Maria has hints of black pepper, sweet sugar, oatmeal, oak with earthy, bitter, smoked chocolate. On the finish, the base beer, a new agave strong ale, was created specifically to pair with the spiciness of the tequila. Adding a sweet honey-like quality to this beer. That's really interesting. I don't think that I have ever heard anybody using the agave fruit, as a grain product, while they're actually creating beer. I don't think I've ever heard of that. I mean, they use that when they do tequila,
right?
But that's the first time I've heard it being used in a beer here. So tell us your tasting notes on this. Was this 1 or 3? Was this
one of 3.
1 of 3.
It's a 3-way tie. If you want her number 3 beer, you got to get that.
Everybody's at the top. They're all special children.
And I love this because it was spicy. I got that pepperiness. But then I also got, and I did really taste this smoked chocolatiness too, which I was like, wow, this is really cool. And then there was that agave/honey sweetness involved. It was such a complex beer, but it was so beautiful. Now, granted, for those of you that do not like tequila, you're probably not going to like this beer because it is very tequila friendly. But I mean, it makes me kind of rethink this whole tequila barrel agingness and how well it can go with a good strong ale. And I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. And, of course, I gave it a 5.
How about that? Listen to Hang Time, give me another. And, again, you're going to hear that 2 more times because all of these have a common rating. What's your next pick?
Okay.
See how I bobbed and weave around that, everybody?
I know. You're very good. You're subtle.
Politically correct.
Yes, you are. Okay, so
don't pick your next special person. Just pick somebody.
I'm going to pick my next special person.
All right.
So, fans who have had to deal with me for a while know that I happen to have a love for things that are bourbon-y and whiskey-ish. So, of course, the next one I'm going to discuss is the Angel Share, which is a barrel-aged English-style barley wine. This thing is absolutely beautiful. And let me tell you the Angel Share story for those of you that do not know anything about bourbon. And you better get on this. Okay, so it's warehouse number 5, built in 1886, that gets the most attention. The other 4 weren't built so well and succumbed over the years. On the outside, to most, number 5 is rather unremarkable. Whitewash building, pretty plain. That is until they pass through the weathered doors and then are easily consumed. Here in the hallowed halls just oozes history. Inside this 3-story building, they find row after row after row of whiskey slumbering away until the distiller calls their name and they are called into action. It's a weathered building with a timeline of over 120 years or so of continuous service. Looking around, there is a warm orange glow from all the wood inside. On both sides of the room, for as far as your eyes can see, there are wood racks with carvings, nicks, and dings. It smells really sweet in here.
And that would be very typical of nearly every whiskey warehouse I've walked in.
Yes.
It is. That sweet smell is like really
intoxicating.
all over you. It's almost like something you have to scrape off, when you walk through a whiskey warehouse.
So, could that be the whiskey breathing? Or perhaps it's the angels doing their work? Or is there just something sweet about 200-year-old wood that intoxicates your sense of smell?
It could be Harold that fell asleep after the 3rd shift last Tuesday in there. He's a little ripe.
Could be.
But he's very sweet.
And I'm sure his glucose is high too. Okay, so imagine the history that belongs to the wood in this shed, let's say. It comes from seeds that were planted when the idea for the Revolutionary War was just fermenting. And it's still here, every single day, telling the story of this distillery. This warehouse has seen it all. It has survived the harsh winter of 1913. There was that tornado in 1956, and who can forget that flood of 1973? But it's still here. It's still working, living, and breathing whiskey as great-grandpa designed it to do. Sure, there are more cobwebs and spiders than there used to be. I mean, it's an old building after all. One of the family members proclaimed it to be a grand old warehouse of monumental importance, so now it's on the National Registry of Historic Buildings. Yet, the premise has always been the same. We need a place to age those spirits, and number 5 has always been there. Ask the family members to describe number 5, and they all will tell you the same thing. The angels get more than their fair share from number 5, but we don't care. To us, there is nothing finer than the whiskey that comes from old number 5. We wish they drank less, but then again, we really don't need an excuse to drink more, do we? Or do we?
So, great story, behind Angel Share here, and a fairly typical story of a really great, historic, whiskey warehouse, itself. So the information about Angel Share, the beer, is again, this is a barrel-aged English style barley wine that has been dropped in a bourbon barrel. The ABV on this is 12.5%. Here's a little bit of some of the tasting notes from Lost Abbey itself. An incredibly smooth and sweet beer with a long-lasting finish. The bourbon barrel aging of the beer results in a full-bodied and luscious texture tailored between fruits and malts. So your tasting notes on this, Julia?
This
is that a tasting note?
To me, this is a tasting note, because if I ever wanted to know what the Angel Share is out of one of my favorite bourbons or whiskeys, now I know what it is. This is it is so beautiful. It is so complex, but yet sweet. I mean, I'm getting a lot of vanilla. I'm getting a lot of caramel. It's divine. It's divine, and it lingers on the tongue, and it's really a divine experience. And I'm so happy to be able to have this in front of me and sip it. And of course, this girl is giving it a 5.
Body should really not make that sound. So, one of the interesting lead-in stories, that I had in about this beer is that this is one of those beers that's in very short supply, and it's little difficult to get a hold of, and that tends to also drive up the price, around this as well, especially in a retail bar setting, or sometimes even in a liquor store. That $3.50 bottle can get pretty expensive for some people, but I still think that when a lot of people think about how they identify with Lost Abbey, this is one of those beers that I think that keeps them in that conversation about really great one-off beers. But the thing that's very interesting, I think, about this particular beer, about Angel Share, is that the consistency that they have of being able to produce this year after year, and again, their ability of balancing the bourbon element to this. I'm not going to talk about my tasting notes, but the one thing that I think is rather interesting about this particular beer is this is one of the few bourbon barrel aged beers that it's really about the beer, and the bourbon is just not overwhelming, and it isn't. So,
no,
yeah. So, which is the last in your top three? See, I'm still getting good about dancing around that.
Triumvirate.
Viva success.
And my third wonderful child that I'm letting shine today. Again, I love making stouts. They're my favorite thing in the world to brew. And so, of course, I'm going to talk about Deliverance.
Ooh, Deliverance. Well, see, these guys immediately go to the movie, right?
I know.
Yeah.
I know. And one of the reasons that really intrigued me about this beer is that it is not only a bourbon barrel-aged blend, but it is also a brandy barrel-aged blend.
Yeah, so a little bit about Deliverance here. It indeed is a blend of bourbon barrel-aged Serpent Stout and brandy-aged Angel Share. So Reverend Mark talked a little bit about there's a couple of beers here that are blends, and this is one of them that we're having here. Deliverance is an epic battle being waged between heaven and hell for the souls of mortal men and your enjoyment in a glass. I don't know if I got that far, but anyway, the ABV on this is 12.5%. Here's a little bit of the tasting notes from Lost Abbey directly. A lively beer with on the palate, wrestling in a tug-of-war of sorts with your affection. First there is booze, and then there are figgy notes. Figgy notes. We have to hop into the figgy notes. A bit of figgy pudding with figgy notes. I know. I don't know. When I just say figgy, it's just, there's some British accent that jumps out at me. Anyway, with a semi-sweet edge that almost develops when we're not for the baker's chocolate, and bitterness that balances out in the finish. Clearly, this is not beer for the faint of heart or weakened souls. This is a fortuitous beer to accompany you on a journey to heaven or hell should you be delivered. So, your tasting notes around Deliverance, Julieanna.
Okay, if ever there was a beer that said figgy and was figgy, this is figgy. I mean, seriously, I feel like I'm having a chocolate-covered fig. Which is something like when I hear dog fruits, I often don't get figginess. I always get raisins, and and occasionally I'll get plums, but this is the figgiest of the fig. But there's also this carameliness and this smoothness. It's just, yes, it is high ABV, and yes, you are getting a bit of the alcohol on the front end, but just a wonderful, smooth finish. And again, another beautiful beer from the Lost Abbey gods. And of course, a 5.
5 as well. Listen to that hang time. Give me another. So thanks, Julieanna. I really appreciate you going through your top picks. Next up is going to be good old boy Dave going through his top 3 picks.
Wait, what? Oh, sorry.
Yes, it's your time, dear.
He got completely sidetracked with the word figgy.
So, I have, yeah, okay. So, my 3, and I will start at number 3, was Judgment Day.
Cool. How about that? Judgment Day. Great beer. hang on just a second. Let me look at what you got here in your setup. All right.
There's a reason I got it listed that way.
Yeah, I know. I'm just looking it over. All right. So, Judgment Day. This is a massive beer. Completely. This is a Belgian quad. ABV of 10.5%. Yeah. Here's a bit of the tasting notes from Lost Abbey. Abbey-style beers are often emphasize layers of malt surrounded by yeast-driven complexities. That's a pretty right-on description going on. Our Judgment Day Ale is the result of lots of fermentables from malts, raisins, and dextrose. There is a very large warming effect from the elevated alcohol levels, which ensure your soul will be saved come Judgment Day. Your tasting notes here on Judgment Day, good old boy Dave.
Sure. Well, I wrote down a few short words because that's the kind I like best. Malt, cola, and alcohol. So I do get, I hate going into trends and going along with what you guys do, but yeah, there's dark fruits in there and there's like raisins, but I'm not going to talk about that. All right. So this is a big old sweet beer that burns your throat just a little bit at the very end. A lot of malt, a lot of complex caramel flavors going on with it. And it is definitely a 10.5% beer.
Yep.
I would give it a 4.
A 4? How about that? Was that your number 3 pick or your number 1?
That was number 3.
That was number 3.
Yeah.
Listen, we need to catch just a little bit of extra time here, so I'm gonna jump on a little bit of this. So this is my number 1 pick is Judgment Day. And I thought I'd read through a little bit of my own tasting notes real quick, as well as my own Suds rating. I'll recap this when I get around to me. But so the thing I wrote down is it's 1,000 dead raisins that are invading your.
Wow.
Yeah, it literally is. It's really heading towards almost down the land of Ruby Port. When I think about kind of where Ruby Port's kind of moved down that path. Maybe Amarone is another tasting profile where you have just a tons of sun-dried, raisins that are actually crushed. That's another. I would say thinking about it more about probably a bit closer towards Amarone. There's a lot more raisin, in Amarone wine, so it's a wine, not a beer. It's just really just great balance. Very, I think it's just a very big beer,
Yes,
as well.
Yes.
My Suds rating for this was actually a 5. So this ain't time. Give me another. So, Dave, why don't you keep on with your number 2 pick there?
So, Judgment Day leads us into my second beer, which is a bourbon barrel-aged version of Judgment Day known as Track 8, Number of the Beast.
How about that? So, Track 8 is a... let's see. This beer is, again, a quad, and so this is a barrel-aged version of what we just talked about with Judgment Day. Basically, they take that and they drop it into a bourbon barrel. The ABV on this is 13.7%, and it was first released in 2012, so they've been making this for a little while. I don't know how old the version is that we have here today, but, interesting tasting notes that the brewery offers up. It says here, upon sampling the base beer, it became apparent that the raisins used to brew the base beer were going to drive the flavor bus for this beer. That's an understatement. The conversations turned to oatmeal raisin cookies and the essence of the freshly baked treat. So we added some cinnamon sticks to the barrels and threw in the essence of a freshly baked treat. So we added some cinnamon sticks to the barrel and then threw in some dried chilies as well. And then what they do, hit blend on top of that.
Puree.
Yep, pretty amazing. So this beer really has amazing depth of flavor and presents unique drinking experience for the consumers who may be seeking enlightenment of Judgment Day. So, Dave, your tasting notes here on track number 8.
Well, what's funny is that, so this is a barrel-aged version of Judgment Day, which Judgment Day, like we said, is 10.5%, and they managed to get this one up to 13.7, but I get less of an alcohol flavor out of Track 8 than I do Judgment Day. I think it rounds out well in the barrel. There's a lot of the vanilla, the spice from the cinnamon, and a tiny, tiny bit of heat from the chilies. But I think they play very well. This is a great beer and a nice warmth, and I give it a 5.
A 5? How about that? Listening to Hang Time, give me another. So, a very interesting move, and I think the one thing that this move reminds me of is Weyerbacher, and how they will take a base beer and then they'll drop it into a bourbon or bourbon barrel or some other type of barrel, aging, and they'll release both, and so you'll get to taste basically the base beer as well as the aged product, and it's really great to see the same thing that Lost Abbey is doing here as well. Your next pick, Dave.
So my number one beer was the only beer in this flight that you could actually see through in the glass. It is Witch's Wit.
How about that? A very interesting choice here. So I know you can't see what's in front of us in our sampling cups, but literally the other 7 beers are just completely opaque. I mean, you cannot see through them at all. This is very blonde and hazy. The ABV on this beer is 4.8%. This is a Belgian wit.
Yeah.
And so here's some of the tasting notes from Lost Abbey. Most definitely, this first and foremost is a wheat beer. You can taste the wheat from the start to the finish. A faint toasted note from the addition of the flaked oats is present in the beer as well. This is a light-bodied beer that finishes with a spicy layer in the end. The overall impression should be an easy-to-drink and refreshing ale. Your tasting notes on this, Dave?
So at 4.8%, this qualifies as a session beer, but the flavor complexity would not let you believe that at the front. Lots of you get the wheat character from it, but you also get citrus in the back end. But throughout the whole thing, you can smell it and you can taste it, but it's very well balanced. Is the coriander that kind of flows through the whole thing, and then at the very end, you get a little spiciness from that yeast. I think this is a tremendous beer, especially to have the flavor complexity it does at such a low ABV. I think it plays with its bigger brothers, which are the rest of the flight, very well, and I give this one a solid 5.
How about that? A 5. Listen to Hang Time, give me another. Well, we're halfway around with our discussions here for Lost Abbey. We're going to take a quick segment break here. We'll be right back. I'll cover my top 3 picks as well as Reverend Mark as we go on around. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to Sips, Suds, and Smokes. I'm good old boy Mike. We have a episode today, a Suds episode. It's a Brewery Takeover edition. We're talking about all beers from Lost Abbey is the show that we have going on today. We're going around talking about our top 3 picks from this flight of 8 beers, and actually I'm up next. So my top pick was Judgment Day, which I just talked a little bit about, and really great. Again, 1,000 raisins dancing all over your tongue. Just a really fabulous beer. I mean, I'm so glad that we have a lot of this, because I'll be having a big glass of this when we're done. My Suds rating for that, again, was a 5. So my number 2 pick is actually both a beer that we have not talked about yet, and that is going to be Lost and Found. Is my number 2 pick here, as well as we have a bit of a story, around this beer as well. So this beer is a
A double.
It's a double. That's why I like that.
Double.
I remember now. I remember the whole point of why I like this. So this beer is a double. It's 8% ABV, and here are a bit of the tasting notes around that beer as well. It's Abbey-style beer, often emphasize layers of malt surrounded by yeast-driven complexities. Our Lost and Found Abbey Ale is the result of a judicious but not overpowering use of crystal malts with a teasing dry chocolate malt finish. This is a perception of warmth from the alcohol, which blends very nicely, keeping the malts in check. So there's a bit of a story kind of behind the story, behind the beer, not a story behind the story. There's a bit of a story behind this beer. Reverend Mark, you have the story.
Well, as we've already recounted in this episode, the Lost Abbey, is sort of a play on words that indicate that an Abbey ale cannot be truly an Abbey ale unless it is brewed by Trappist monks. And yet this particular brewery is not established by a monastery. So there's this sense of being lost and yet kind of wanting to find, the connection, to this great brewing tradition that was started by these Belgian monks. So with the Lost and Found beer, there's this story about Brother Michael, who is at the very end of the day, as most very dutiful and contemplative monks are wont to do, is comparing manuscripts of some ancient texts. And as a scholar, he's comparing different kinds of what would be called form and redaction criticism. That is, looking at the form of the Scripture, the way in which the Scripture has been historically edited.
I stopped listening. I don't know what he's saying.
And won't bore you for too much longer, except to say that it's a very arduous process through which monks who historically have tried to sort of rectify, what texts are saying, and to make sure that one translation is true to the next, oftentimes, will spend months on end trying to figure out just a particular sentence and whether or not it can actually be translated as they think it should. And so the story goes that this Brother Michael, late one night, in his room, with a small snifter of this wonderful double, is sitting down, and he's going over once again, this text. And as he is studying and comparing notes, he finally knows that he, as a translator, has the right translation. And his beer tastes exquisite once this enlightenment comes to him. And so the double becomes really sort of a symbol of scholarship, devotion, and a zest for life that is made perfect through enjoying simple things.
Wow, how about that? A cool story. So, my tasting notes here on Lost and Found, it is maybe more dry than your typical double, and I really like that. If that was probably my only criticism of just having a double in general, is that they're just all incredibly sweet, and they have kind of a burnt, almost like a burnt orange or burnt sugar, type element to them. It's very interesting. I have a double from another brewery, we can taste right after this, that is very, emblematic of that. And you'll go, yeah, that's totally, not even close to what this is. And again, it's that drying element that I really love about this. So it really tends to just keep the sweetness that's natural double, just kind of keeps it in check. It has some light kind of lemon lime citrus hint around it, which is, again, it's kind of very different than your typical double. I just wrote down it's a very unique double in general. My Suds rating for Lost and Found is a 4. A body should not make that sound. Reverend Mark, is this in your top 3?
This is actually in my top 3, and I would have to say that one of the reasons why I was drawn toward it, and this just is obviously very sort of kind of a serendipitous thing, is that this next weekend I actually have a double on my calendar to brew in my backyard. And I'm always trying to perfect this style because, on one hand, there's a lot that can be involved in terms of your malt bill. But on the other hand, it really, if it's done properly, it should be, well fermented or attenuated, and it should really have somewhat of a dry finish, not entirely, but at least that it's not overly sweet, because that, I think, is what distinguishes a double from like a Belgian strong dark. And so for me, at least, I found in this particular, version of the Lost Abbey, their double, their Lost and Found, to be a really, really good example of what a double should be. That is, it has caramel notes, it has chocolate notes, it's estery, that is, the yeast produces certain kinds of flavors that are kind of like banana and clove. I just think in some ways it's a very straightforward double. It lingers with, I know we've brought up the whole thing of dark fruit way too much, but there is a certain kind
There's
of
a lot of it here, that's why.
Raisiny and honey kind of notes, but they're not overly lingering. They're just there. And I just think it's a big beer, but not overly big. And I think also it would be a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful beer to pair, like with some sort of like a roasted pork loin or whatever. So to me, it was like one of my, I guess I would have to say it was my favorite, although it was hard to pick out of all these wonderful 8 beers that we sampled. So I gave it actually a 5.
Wow. Listen, hang time, give me another. And, definitely a really great beer. My last pick here is actually one of Dave's as well. It's Deliverance. And I'm sorry I didn't chime in. Or it was yours. It was Julieanna's. She's just gesturing to herself. She can say, wait, it's me.
Yeah, dude.
You got a pretty
one of my
mouth,
3
boy.
children.
One of your 3 children.
Squeal!
Yeah, all right. So just to remind everybody, this was the one that was blended. This is bourbon barrel-aged Serpent Stout and brandy-aged Angel Share is what this is. Here's my tasting notes on this. Maybe it's a tad bit forward, with the bourbon. But it's still way in check. And we talked a little bit about kind of the whole balance of, barrel aging. So here's how I described what was going on. It's like somebody took a caramel and flattened it out and then wrapped it around your tongue. The aroma on this was just like essence of cocoa dust. Like if somebody had just truly, had cocoa just purely in a powder form, if you just smelled this, it would that's what it would smell like, would be cocoa dust. Very complex. Just a really fabulous beer. The only thing I'm pissed about is that we don't have enough of this. So my Suds rating for this for Deliverance is a 4 as well. All right, Reverend Mark, we only got about 3 or 4 more minutes.
Okay.
What other beers do we need to cover with you?
Well, I don't have anything original to add now that we've been around the table.
Cool.
I'm touching on 2 that have already been mentioned. So I'll have to say that my second one would be Angel Share.
Yes.
Wow.
I just I thought it was the perfect melding of bourbon barrel richness with some vanilla notes, with spice, with a kind of a really deep wine type goodness that's blended with malt. I think also that had it not been for the barrel aging, the sweetness would have been not so rounded, and that the alcohol would not have been so muted. So I really think that the barrel aging really made the big difference in the Angel Share, which is, of course, a part of the whole story of this beer in the first place. So I would give that one a 4. And then my last one, but certainly not the least, is concurring with Dave, track number 8.
Bam.
Track number 8. Now, I have to tell you that
So fascinating.
when I read about this experiment, it made me very, very hesitant. And yet I have to say that the combining of the spice, namely or mostly, I guess, the cinnamon stick with the dried chili, made this high gravity beverage something that was very savoring, that is something that there was just enough of that there to suggest something that was interesting going on in your mouth. And I also think that this beer has improved over the last hour as it has warmed up.
Right.
I've been sipping on it, and it has become increasingly good. So I will have to say, because of that fact alone, it has gone from a 4 to a 5 in my category. I just think it's amazing.
How about that? Really amazing beers all the way around, and really enjoyed all of our discussion across the entire flight. So some really great some beers to come back around.
And if I may say something quickly, for as much as we've enjoyed these beers, when they were first served semi-cold, I think that all of our top picks have really just expressed themselves even more and opened up as time has gone by. So, for your listeners out there, for what we're saying about the beer currently, it's even that much more as they open up. And
they've hit their throat about 65 degrees, haven't they?
Yeah,
because we had these cooled down, at refrigerator temperature, probably around 55, and probably when we tasted them, they were just maybe about 58. But again, sometimes when you have a barrel-aged product, they just open up, when they hit, kind of that magical moment. Room temperature, I don't know about that.
Right.
But, I'd say, somewhere around, 63, 65, that's probably the magic number, for these, so.
Yeah. I'd say this track 8, as I taste it just once again, I'm actually picking up coconut in this, and I'm picking up devil's food, and it's making me think of childhood and hostess
cupcakes.
Those snowballs, with the coconut. I know they're awful, but but this is not awful. But it takes me back to a time when even that was delicious.
Right.
All right, so let me recap all of the words that we've had in a beer show. We used the word snowball, rectify, and what was the other one? Redacted in a beer episode. Okay, I just want to point that out. So if none of you got that, sit down, have another beer. Okay,
or two.
This would be a good show to play Scrabble.
For sure. Barrel aged beer for 400. All right. So let's wrap up our episode for today. It was really great to talk about all these beers from Lost Abbey. Thanks to all of our listeners here on Sips, Suds, and Smokes. You can catch all of our episodes online on iTunes, SoundCloud, TuneIn, Stitcher, YouTube, Uncle John's Basement, and Spreaker, our native media host. Our terrestrial radio stations are questioning all the time, I really wonder if they're going to send us a bottle of Angel Share along with their request. Probably not. But anyway, we hope that they'll still want to pick us up. Listen, if you'd like to hear us on your favorite radio station, why don't you drop them a note and copy us as well. You can send us a note anytime. Our email address is info@sipssudsandsmokes.com. Dave is really questioning, I just wonder where I can get a case of Judgment Day sent to me, right?
You can send that to Leave the Cork In at Sip, Suds, and Smokes.
Our daily tasting notes flow out on Twitter every single day. Our handle on Twitter is @SipSudsSmoke. Our Facebook page is always buzzing with lots of news. Sips, Suds, and Smokes is sponsored by Craft Beer Kings. Craft Beer Kings is a home for all of your beer, wine needs, as well as a lot of these Lost Abbey beers actually came from them, so thank you. They're also home of the Mystery Box. You can reach them at www.craftbeerkings.com. Listen, do us a favor, take the time to rate this episode if you're listening to us online. That's a great big help to us, and we get to see your feedback as well. I definitely want to thank my co-host for being here at the table today. Good old gal Julieanna, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Good old boy Dave.
Hey, if you can't make friends, make beer.
See, I didn't say thanks for being here.
And then you'll have friends.
Yeah. If you can't make beer, drink beer.
Reverend Mark, thanks for being here.
Blessing on you, my sons and daughters.
This is good old boy Mike thanking you for joining us, and come back and join us once again, and I'll ask you to keep on sipping.
This has been a One Tan Hand production of Sips, Suds, and Smokes, a program devoted to the appreciation of some of the finer slices of life. From the Dude in the Basement Studios, your hosts, the Good Old Boys, will see you all next time.